Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day two of Spine 2021. First and foremost, we are in the first session for the day today, which is the award paper session. And I would like to welcome our my co-moderators, Dr. Abhay Kumar and Dr. Ben Reutberg. So I think without any delay, let's get on to the first presentation, which is on symptomatic pneumocephalus following lumbar spine surgery, a rare presentation by Dr. Apurva Prasad.
Good morning, ma'am. Yeah. So the simplest explanation is usually the best one, but to arrive at the simple explanation is sometimes very difficult and requires a lot of clinical expertise and judgment, which sometimes the young surgeons like us lack. To highlight this is this female who was a 42 years old female, obese, who was suffering from severe low back pain and bilateral buttock pain since the last 7 to 8 years. She presented to us this year when she had developed weakness and severe pain in the right leg and severe claudication of 15 minutes, and she could not even sleep due to the pain. Clinically, she had definite wasting of the right calf muscles with EHL and TA weakness, and both the ankle jerks were diminished. The planters were bilaterally flexor, and she had a bilaterally restricted terminal straight leg raising test. A dynamic X-rays of the spine revealed sacralized L5 vertebrae. And on extension scan, as it has been highlighted by the red circles, there was opening up of the disc spaces at L34, 45, and L23 levels with a severe foraminal compression at the L4, L5 level, which has been indicated with the right by the yellow arrow. The MRI scan confirmed the same findings, and there was a severe lateral recess stenosis at the L3, L4, and the L4, L5 level, more on the right side as compared to the left side. So the decision to do a IDSS at all the three levels was taken, and because of the subtle evidences of instability, a non-invasive, lesser invasive stabilization with a Hartshill ring stabilization was planned. And while fixing the Hartshill ring, we usually use Drummond wires. And while passing the Drummond wires on the left side, there was a slight dural nick, which was immediately closed primarily with a Vicryl 40 suture and augmented with a muscle patch and a T-seal glue. And a mini vac drain was inserted over the muscle layer because the patient was obese and with a lot of fat. So, as per the protocol, the patient was mobilized out of bed by day 2, and she was absolutely all right and planned for surgery on day 3. When in the morning, she developed severe headache, nausea, and giddiness. So, initially, we suspected a low pressure headache, and the patient was advised bed rest, and IV fluids were started with the intention of hydrating the patient. But the patient did not respond to it, and by the evening, she worsened to the extent that she stopped taking any food and stopped moving at all. And the classical complaint which the patient had was severe headache, even on the slightest change in position of the head or the body. And this headache was very sudden in onset and lasted hardly for 3 to 4 minutes, with mainly being bifrontal in location. This did not go with the diagnosis of a low pressure headache, and then an X ray of the skull was advised by the senior surgeon which confirmed the diagnosis. We can see the air in the suprasellar cistern, in the temporal horn, and in the occipital horn. And the diagnosis of a post-dural tear pneumocephalus was confirmed. The management remains conservative in most of the cases. The patient was started on IV fluids. It was continued at 80 ml per hour. High flow oxygen was given. The patient was kept in a head low position. And with the symptomatic treatment, luckily the patient recovered within 48 hours, and then she was discharged 3 days later. This is a video of the patient at the time of discharge, which has been taken with the patient's permission. And we can see that now she, at the time of discharge on post-op day 6, she was absolutely all right. Now, this pneumocephalus after a posterior lumbar arthrodesis is quite a rare occurrence and has been reported fairly rarely in the literature. Incidental urotomies are fairly common, but progressing to a pneumocephalus is not so common. Various theories and mechanisms have been proposed for this occurrence. The most favored ones being the inverted soda bottle mechanism, wherein the CSF leaking out is replaced by the air coming in, and the bowel valve hypothesis, which says that because of a single valve effect, the air enters but cannot escape the subarachnoid space. Nitrous oxide anesthesia and sometimes fracture of the cribriform plate in obese patients also has been purported as a mechanism. And in a calcified disc, the occurrence is fairly commonly reported. The symptoms remain the same which were encountered in our patient. And very symptomatic, immediate, urgent worsening of the patient has been tension pneumocephalus, which has a radiological criteria, which I'll explain later. And the most common time of occurrence of these symptoms remains 24 to 48 hours after posterior lumbar surgery. So we can differentiate it by a posterior lumbar low pressure headache by the location of the headache, which is classically bifrontal and changing with the slightest postural variation of the patient. Risk factors during spine surgery have been purported to be the reverse Trendelenburg position, a long duration of surgery, nitrous oxide anesthesia, and placement of vacuum drainage in the patient of CSF leak, which maybe was the culprit in our case, though it was above the muscle layer. The investigation of choice remains the CT scan, which can detect even 0.5 ml of air. We did an X-ray of the skull, which detects almost 2 ml of air. And the criteria for attention pneumocephalus is 25 to 65 milliliters. And this Mount Fuji sign is a very dangerous sign, which warrants urgent burr-hole evacuation of the air, which is the only indication of surgery in these patients. Otherwise, they resolve by conservative management. So what we learned from this case and what recommendations we should follow are that the dural tear should be closed immediately, as early as possible, and the operating table must be leveled whenever the dural tear occurs, and the head end must be raised only after a satisfactory closure of the dural defect. A primary watertight closure of the dura and augmentation with a Surgicel or a T-seal glue or a Duragen patch definitely lowers the occurrence of pneumocephalus. And in such patients, the vacuum drains should be avoided. So when we diagnose pneumocephalus, we immediately remove the drain, which mostly help the patient to recover in a earlier fashion. And in these patients, an air travel is not advised because the air may increase. So for a week, they should not be advised to travel by air. So to conclude, pneumocephalus largely remains a clinical diagnosis. We should have a high degree of suspicion and experience to suspect these patients. And then 85% of the patients recover with a conservative management. Hardly 15% with a severe tension pneumocephalus require surgery. And early treatment and prompt remedy is mostly what is required in these patients. These are my references. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Apurva, for that presentation. Any questions by Dr. Ben or Dr. Kumar?
Apurva, it's a good presentation. Can I ask you, why did you do an X-ray rather than patients complaining of headache post-surgery, persistent headache? Why did you do an X-ray rather than a CT scan? Is that anything you had in mind before doing?
Sir, when we suspected this diagnosis, we immediately did the search or review of literature, and because the patient was fairly symptomatic, so we suspected that the air should be definitely more than 0.5 ml, which should be detected on an X-ray. Second was the cost factor, sir, because definitely the CT scan is a bit expensive, and to explain to the patient the CT brain after a lumbar spine surgery was a bit difficult. So these were the two reasons why we opted for an X-ray, because we knew that the air entry is fairly large enough to be symptomatic, which can be detected on an X-ray. Had it not been, then definitely we would have had to do a CT scan. But clinically and judgmentally, we suspected that X-ray should be enough, and luckily we were right.
Okay. So apart from the bed rest, what else was the treatment started? Did you started on high flow oxygen and these things?
Yes, sir. We started the patient on IV fluids. Overhydration and hyperoxygenation was the treatment. We started the patient on 6 liters oxygen, 6 liters per minute at 100% oxygen, and IV fluids and lowering of the head end, along with the symptomatic treatment for nausea and vomiting and headaches.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Was there any post-op or follow-up X-ray done or a CT done again in this patient?
We did not do the X-ray of the skull,
during
ma'am. We
the
did not
follow-up,
repeat it.
what was the condition of the wound?
Ma'am, the condition of the patient.
Of the wound,
The wound healed.
because
Yeah,
you said
yes, ma'am. So the wound healed absolutely fine. There was no post-surgical CSF leak. The wound healed fine, and the patient after discharge was fairly asymptomatic. So we did not repeat an X-ray of the skull.
Okay. Any comments, Dr. Ben?
I think it's very good that you are presenting a complication, and we learn the most and the best from complications, our own and that of others. And I think it's great to present them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.